Hello, my fellow Whovians, and welcome to my latest Doctor Who review, where today I review The Doctor's Wife, starring Matt Smith as the 11th Doctor. So, The Doctor's Wife, this is the 216th Doctor Who story, and it was written by Neil Gaiman, who's a very famous writer. And this is the fourth episode of Series 6 of Doctor Who, although it's the third story, because the first story was a two-part story. Anyway, so the plot of The Doctor's Wife is as follows. The 11th Doctor receives a message from an old Time Lord friend. The message brings him, Rory, and Amy to another universe where they meet an alien who eats TARDISes. Just to elaborate on that, the TARDIS basically ends up in the consciousness of a woman known as Idris, and the TARDIS basically now has a voice and a soul, and the Doctor has to work out why. So basically, the Doctor, Amy, and Rory encounter this kind of entity known as House, who wants to eat the TARDIS or something like that. And at the beginning of the story, we meet these people called Auntie and Uncle and Nephew. Nephew actually happens to be an Ood for some reason. But Auntie and Uncle, they are basically dying. Their bodies are made up of various parts of other things, which is really weird. And they bring Idris to this place at the beginning, and they drain her mind and soul. Yeah, it's a bit complicated. So, The Doctor's Wife. I've never really been sure about how I feel about this episode, to be honest. I mean, despite the fact that it gets quite a lot of praise from the fandom, or at least a lot of the Matt Smith fans really like it. And granted, I do admit, it's a cool concept, seeing what the TARDIS would actually be like with a voice and with a soul. But I don't think this episode went about it in the right way. Don't get me wrong, I don't think this episode is the worst of Series 6, and it is better than Curse of the Black Spot, but I thought this story was way too outlandish, way too weird, just to the point where it was nonsensical, to be honest. I didn't really get it, to be honest. Like, watching the first half of it, I certainly thought, what's going on in this story? I thought this story was really it felt like it was complicated. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it was kind of weird. Like, what the hell was going on? I mean, the first half of the story is the Doctor talking to the TARDIS and trying to work out what the hell's gone on. And then Amy and Rory get stuck inside House, and he begins tormenting them or something. What? The second half of the story is more interesting when Amy and Rory have to deal with all the things that House is throwing at them, and they get locked in this corridor, and it starts messing with their heads, things go a bit dark, Rory ends up becoming old, and Rory dies again! Stop killing Rory! For fuck's sake! Aside from that, it's a pretty good sequence, and it is kind of scary, so I do appreciate that. And the fact that we have an Ood back in the story is nice, I do appreciate it, even if it is called Nephew. I just don't understand the whole point of this story. Okay, so the House wants to use the TARDIS to eat the TARDIS, and then they have to build a TARDIS to get to this other universe or something. I think that's what happened, but honestly, it was kind of confusing in a lot of areas. They end up, when they arrive, they end up in this other universe, because the Doctor receives a message from this little box, which apparently is from the Time Lords. And apparently House has killed hundreds of Time Lords before. Yeah. I don't know, maybe I missed a few things when watching this, but I honestly found this story really confusing and kind of hard to follow. I do appreciate the end of the story. There was a lot of emotion at the end when the Doctor says goodbye to the TARDIS. That was a lovely scene, and Matt Smith's performance was very emotional, and I really believed that. I thought he did a really good job. What I don't like really about the story is the weird tone of it. I think it's way too outlandish, way too weird, and just doesn't make a lot of sense in some areas. Another thing I have a problem with is the sexualization of what is in a family show. I still enjoy parts of this story, but the whole thing with the Doctor calling the TARDIS sexy, it's a little bit inappropriate, really. I'm not saying like it's a full-on porno or anything. I'm not going that far. I'm just saying that the implication of like the sexual innuendos, the sexual references, it's not, it doesn't need to be done. I mean, if it was subtle, then okay, I can understand. But every 2 minutes, the Doctor and the TARDIS are talking to each other and going, oh, sexy, oh, yes, sexy, oh, right, yes, well. I don't know, I just don't think it really works, to be honest. And, given that the Doctor ends up marrying River Song in the end of this series, calling this the Doctor's Wife is kind of ironic, really. I mean, Karen Gillan and Arthur Darvill do a good job as Amy and Rory. They definitely elevate the story. And also I have to mention Adrian Schiller and Elizabeth Barrington as Uncle and Auntie. They're pretty good characters. They're very quirky, very interesting, but they just kind of die. Like, what causes them to die? I've totally forgot. I don't know. Is it ever explained? I find the storytelling of this story to be particularly hard to follow, if I'm going to be honest. There is a great sequence when the Doctor and, well, Idris, we'll call her Idris, but the Doctor and the TARDIS have to build another TARDIS to get to Amy and Rory. And the CGI sequence in which we see their TARDIS flying around, the visuals are stunning in that sequence, and they are really cool. The aesthetics of the story are really cool. Like, it looks very dark and murky, and it does look kind of scary, and it has a scary atmosphere. Certainly the scariest scenes are when Amy and Rory are going through House. The voice of House is Michael Sheen, and, you know, that's good. I think Michael Sheen does a pretty good job as House. Also, we get to see the old TARDIS console. We get to see the Eccleston and Tennant TARDIS console. So, you know, that was a nice bit of fan service. I really appreciate that. But for me, the story is weird and a bit overly complex in areas. Doesn't make a huge amount of sense. And the weird tone of this story is really distracting. And some of the dialogue, it just doesn't work. Like, you know, the beginning of the story when the Doctor, Amy and Rory arrive, and then Idris, you know, who has the TARDIS consciousness inside her, she's like saying all these random things, and then she's like kissing the Doctor's neck and biting him, and it's just like, what's going on? I've got no idea what the hell this is all about. And why are these characters called Auntie, Uncle, and Nephew? I don't get it. I mean, they're well played, I guess, by the actors, but I didn't understand half the stuff that went on in this story, to be honest. There's a charm about it. There's definitely a charm about it, but I just think that the sexualization ruins it. I think if you got rid of them saying sexy, I think there might have been a nice sort of charm there. I mean, it didn't have to be so, you know, romantic and flirty. You know, it could have just been, you know, more of a kinship, more of a friendship, because, again, we're supposed to believe that the Doctor and River Song are going to get married at some point. So, yeah, this story is kind of confusing. But that being said, it's got a couple of things to enjoy, but I just don't really care for this one, to be honest. I mean, if you love it, that's fine. I'm glad that you love it. But for me, it was all right. I guess that's kind of the best way I can describe it. There are things to appreciate, but unfortunately the negatives outweigh the positive. It is better than Curse of the Black Spot. Definitely better than that. But I just thought this one was way too weird. So overall, I'm going to give The Doctor's Wife... I'll give it a 5 out of 10. I like the Murray Gold soundtrack as well, even though he does reuse the I Am the Doctor theme, which is fine. I mean, a lot of people have an issue with that being used so much. I don't mind it. I mean, it is Matt Smith's theme, so they are going to use it quite a lot. So sadly, The Doctor's Wife didn't really do it for me, but if you like this story, that's fine. What do you think of it? Please comment down below and let me know. Stay tuned next time when we come to the second and final two-part story of Series 6, which is The Rebel Flesh and the Almost People. So until next time, I'm Mr. Tarnus11. Thank you for watching. See you soon. Bye for now.